In this series of Sustainability of Fashion, we'll be exploring fashion's precarious relationship with sustainability and its attempts to address growing concerns surrounding its non-conservational approaches to society and environment. Thank you all for tuning in to a third episode in our sustainability series. Joining us today we have
Nazina,
Kate,
Samia,
Apranji,
and myself, Ashwini. This episode will focus on a consumer's responsibility with regards to sustainability and what the challenges faced are by those who want to shop ethically. Do you guys think there's been a change in consumer behavior towards sustainability?
I think recently there's raising awareness and things like that. Consumers are also a little bit overwhelmed, I think, in terms of fashion by all the fast fashion. The trend cycle has just gone nuts.
Yeah.
So it's got a bit too much. So there's a bit more of an interest in slow fashion movement, investment dressing, all those little buzzwords that kind of are trying to stem the tide.
we need to change.
Yeah. So I think that's. I think you are starting to see like a bit more of that, but generally, I think the whole mass consumption thing. We've all been raised on a diet of mass consumption. Is kind of what we're designed to do. I suppose humans naturally have always wanted to acquire things, objects. It's like for status or whatever that is. We're natural little magpies. We want to pick things up and own them. And what the mass market has done is kind of fed that natural,
exacerbated it.
And
made it so convenient for us.
Used it against us in a way because they've just sold us a lot of we don't need.
At a cheap price.
And we buy it. Right? We properly go in for that wholesale. So I think it's kind of like a lot of things is using a natural behaviour and making a lot of money out of it. So I think ultimately that is going to be, if you're going for the sustainability, you're like looking at raising prices in order to counteract that, to make the industry more like ethical overall. The industry's got to break that habit, but the consumer's got to break that habit.
Do you know what? I've always been really intrigued by the whole sort of behavior of buying on a mass scale, because when you look at, I guess, the sort of stages after the credit crisis, where you had retailers like Primark sort of selling items like a penny each, and people just going absolutely nuts. It really resonated, with me, and it made me sort of really take a step back and think, wow, this is a real statement towards excess. It's a real statement towards waste, but on such an acceptably wide scale. And even when you think about it, actually, because we apparently, not apparently, but, clothes are sort of defined as a basic human need. So everyone, in fact, partakes in, the sort of act of acquiring or wearing clothes. But it's seen more symbolically. It's seen more as, wearing something new is almost like a purification. You're purified if you wear something new. You're dirty if you wear something old.
There's always those celebrities who go, I just, I get one t-shirt I get a new t-shirt every day, a new pair of pants, a new pair of socks, and it's and
I don't repeat my clothes.
And then I throw them in the bin, and it's like, that's not something to be proud of.
It's not at all.
Like it reflects a lot on your character. Like, what are you, like, on your ethics as well? Like, you participating in throwaway culture, like, shows like
that's the height of like a linear chain of just literally picking it up, and the amount of time and effort and energy and everything that goes into manufacturing something, and then suddenly you use it once, and really the life of it, the purpose of it lasts like 5 hours, and then after that it's back in like a landfill or something.
That's the negative effect of fast fashion. That's exactly what it does. It takes away your connection with the true value, the true intrinsic value of that item that you've just purchased. You know, the many people that have been abused to create it under horrible conditions, the transportation process, just everything, that whole supply chain, that whole life cycle has just been wasted. You know, I again, to add to that, I know people that actually can't be bothered to wash their clothes, so they just buy new ones.
You know people that...
I know people who do that.
I don't think it's that extreme though. I don't think like we throw away clothes all the time. I think I don't know. I live in an area where I literally see piles of clothing just everywhere. It's becoming like the new.
I think if you
rubbish,
maybe if you totted it up, if you kept a record of like how often you bin something or decide to replace something that maybe was okay.
But are they going to charity shops before that as well?
Some of them, I mean, if I was to be really investigative, then I'll be sort of looking at the pile of clothing that's been chucked away, and you'll never see an Armani suit or a Chanel suit in that pile. What do you see? You see Primark, you see Henny's, you see something that's identifiably a trend-driven item that is no longer desired.
Yeah. Exactly. I think it does very much come down to design, because like me, for instance, when I buy just a regular t-shirt from a high street brand, like it's not of as much value to me. I wear it a couple times and then eventually I think, oh, maybe it's not that nice anymore. And then I find faults with it. I think, oh, it's kind of loose here actually.
It's got a bit bubbly. I'll chuck that.
Yeah, I'll chuck that. Whereas like if I actually buy something that's more expensive and that's like a nice design, like I know I had this dress when I was little and it was such a pretty dress, such a nice design, such a unique design, and it was quite expensive, but I loved it and I fought for my parents to buy it for me. And I literally wore it. I started wearing it when I was like 4 and I wore it until I was like 10. It was so tight for me. It was so small, but I didn't want to throw it away. And the number of times I used that, like that should be the case with every piece of clothing, right?
Yeah, pounds per wear. You work on it like that. So if you paid $14.99 for it, you need to wear it at least 15 times for it to...
So maybe it's the value to the person rather than the value of the brand.
Yeah.
For places like Primark and things like that, people don't actually give value to the clothes. They just buy it because it's cheap.
Right. Yeah. And that's the issue. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
And that gives it more chance of it being thrown away. Maybe we do need to change our mindset as a society about, rather than having loads of clothes and feeling proud of that, having a small selection
of good clothes that you value, you wear often, and not being afraid to like show up to work in the same outfit like on Monday and on Friday wearing the same top. Like that's right now that's considered like, oh my god, why is she wearing the same thing again? But really, that
social pressure is absolutely ridiculous, because it makes absolutely no difference what you unless you work in a job that requires it for your own personal health and safety. It really doesn't matter what you've got on.
So what are some challenges you guys face while trying to shop ethically?
I think it's the same thing that you find across like a lot of ethical, sustainable brands. The same thing as when you go into a supermarket and you try and buy tea.
Yes.
The tea is fair trade, or the tea is helping a rainforest, or the tea is doing something else that's really great. But I can't have all of those things in one tea. Yeah. So then I have to stand there and choose which one I'm going to do, and it's like now I feel terrible for the other two teas that I didn't pick. Invariably, I go with the things like that. I tend to go for the fair trade option. Yeah. I see a lot less of the fair trade thing happening in fashion.
It's very true.
I don't see that plugged quite as much.
Maybe
it seems
the
to
manufacturer is expensive, like paying the people.
Yeah, they actually fair trade is probably maybe that's one of the hardest things that they're going to face.
Yeah. Because the money's passed down to the consumer. Consumers don't want to pay more.
No, they don't. But perhaps also consumers are somehow almost more connected with certain aspects of sustainability than others, and it usually seems that it's not the ones that are associated with other people. frogs, whales, whatever, that's fine. We'll rescue all of them. But if it's other people, it's like, oh, not really bothered.
Yeah, no, it's true. Human bondage, don't really care.
Yeah. I do think it's but you don't see that touted. It's not that it's not there by any stretch of the imagination. There's loads of designers who are doing all sorts of like great things, getting involved in all sorts of projects. There are all sorts of brands who are doing it, but they're not always the most. They're not the biggest. They're not the most easy to find. A lot of them, you know, I know there's like people out there doing loads of amazing stuff, harnessing all the tech, doing fair trade, you know, and getting into all these projects and really going through all of their supply chain. But I know about them because I work in the industry.
That's right.
And I bump into them at trade shows.
What about the average?
And I talk to them about this, and I can spend like half an hour having a chat, reading a press release, and get all this information, and it's all there for me. But if I didn't work in the industry, it's not there.
I think for me personally, for instance, for me to try and shop ethically and sustainably, I don't know who to trust, because really, like, H&M says they're sustainable, but are they? Bingo. And somebody else says are they? I mean, am I just paying more for no reason?
Exactly.
Really?
A lot of brands like tend to target that whole sustainable or eco-conscious consumer, and they try to maybe rip them off.
Yeah.
They sort of play into that whole trend of, oh, we're sustainable, we're eco-friendly, buy from us.
Yeah.
And a lot of times customers do fall into the trap and they end up paying more.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily actually any different from buying from like the cheapest place you can find. I mean,
I also think even if the initiative is genuine, there's still a little bit of, because it is confusing to understand, there is a bit of suspicion on the part of the consumer. Well, actually, if I do this, are you going to do what you say you're going to do? Or you know, is this thing genuinely sustainable? And because of the lack of transparency, they've got no way of checking. So even the initiatives that are wholly, you know, pure motives, all of that sort of stuff, are making a real difference, they might not be trusted in the same way, because, you know, we're not used to having that kind of information, and we're not going to be able to get
that's something we should question companies, like, why aren't you letting us know all of these things? Why aren't you completely transparent?
Yeah, and if what you're doing is so great, why aren't you telling us all about it? But I think there would be, you know, it would put more trust in the industry. So when they do these things, people don't actually see it as just lip service or jumping on a bandwagon. And I think there is a tendency to, like, for consumers not to have full confidence.
But there usually is like a product range that's supposed to be sustainable, rather than everything in that brand that's sustainable. And like, since we're like shopping more online now, I guess we are finding, like, if I'm on ASOS and I'm trying to find, like, I don't know, a crop top, I'm not going to go to the sustainable range.
We've not been sponsored by ASOS, but that's fine. Just wanted to say.
Okay. Yeah, if I wanted to find a crop top, I wouldn't go to the sustainable range and I would look for something specific. So
a lot of people don't even know that ASOS does eco-friendly and sustainable products.
I imagine there's a lot of places, depending on whether, you know, obviously H&M have put a massive, like, you know, they have put money into promoting their conscious collection. But if you're maybe not in central London or in one of the big cities, how much retail space does that collection get? Do people actually outside of any major city, in smaller stores, even get the opportunity to buy it?
Exactly. When I went back home to India, the H&M there was nothing you could, like, how they promote the conscious line or the sustainable line so much over here. There was nothing back home. Like, the people working, the staff, like, they weren't even aware of all of this.
The funny thing is, those are the countries it's affecting most.
Yes,
exactly. Sustainability and ethics.
I mean, the irony of what they've called it, and then not, you know, that so many people are unconscious of the conscious collection is, I mean, it's just silly. I suppose that's part of the problem, the fact that it's confined to a range. Why is what they're doing, why isn't that just their standard model? And then you've just taken a whole chunk out of the system that the consumer doesn't even have to think about, because you already know that's been dealt with for you.
Adding on to what Samia was saying, like, even with like vintage clothes and stuff, for instance, when you go in there, you don't have as many options, which I think is one of the biggest challenges that we face, really, because if I go into a vintage shop and I buy something and I like it and I buy it and I think, okay, this is quite unique, I can't wear it on just a regular pair of jeans or something. I want something like a nice skirt for it or something. Especially for me, like I don't find my size easily, so it's really hard for me to go into another vintage shop and really find something that goes with it. So eventually I get sick of looking, and I end up going and buying a skirt that matches at a high street brand, which really
it's looking for stuff
the purpose is
specific.
lost.
It's
So,
true. You know what? I can sort of, I can, you know, understand
Relate to
that. Yeah, I
that.
can really relate to that. But what I tend to do, and it's something that I didn't realize I actually do, which is when I do buy my vintage clothing, I have to readjust. I have to alter it. So I've got my little sewing machine at home, and I guess this is how I think conscious, you know, people need to be when they're actually embarking on this sort of journey. Even though obviously I go to vintage shops for different reasons other than sustainability, it's really to sort of find clothing that truly expresses, you know, my personal style. But whilst I'm doing that, I am actually doing something that's sustainable. But, you know, I'm fully committed to it, where if I do buy and it doesn't fit me, I have to alter it. I change it. If I'm buying, I don't know, something and it's a man's, you know, pair of trousers, for example, I would have to alter it so that it fits me. And I think, you know, that there definitely are ways around, you know, the sort of, you know, the sort of challenges that you just mentioned. But again, is it because we're so time sensitive?
Are consumers like bothered enough to put in that extra effort, right? Like, would you rather just pop into a high street brand and buy something cheaper that's really like that fits you perfectly, or would you rather go in and look for something, spend an hour like fixing it? And
I think that's the thing. I suppose then it's the industry's responsibility to, if we're going to go down this route, that they make it as easy as possible.
Absolutely.
All of those aspects of sustainability applied across the board. You don't have to spend like 4 hours researching your t-shirt before you go and buy it. You can get all the sizes. I mean, the whole point of like fast fashion, not just in terms of like fast as in trend turnover, but the sort of the price point and everything like that. It's made fashion democratic. Everyone can have a go, regardless of budget and things like that. And that, you know, that's a really good thing. But then you need to make also sustainability like democratic from that point of view, because although like the slow fashion movement and investment dressing is all great, if you don't have X amount of money to lay out in the first place, your only option is Primark. And then it's going to disintegrate, and then you're going to need to get something else. So it's not always a question of actually being able to think about it. It's actually being able to practically do it. So then it will lie with the company to make that change for you, because you can't do it yourself.
I read this article the other day about millennials and how a lot of millennials say they do care about sustainability and brands that are sustainable, but they don't necessarily take actions towards it. Like they want the company to do it for them.
They want the easy way.
Exactly. Considering all of the problems that we've discussed, they want the companies to do it on their behalf.
Well, this leads us on to the next question. Do consumers actually have the real power to change?
En masse, I think there's potential. I mean, if it's one or two, if everyone turned around and said, I am not buying from your brand, period, because, you know, if it was in the thousands, millions, whatever, then obviously that's gonna like make a massive difference to how they...
Do you know what? Absolutely. And I completely agree. I challenge everyone to go to whichever retailer they get their items from and to ask, demand demand transparency, demand to know exactly where the product comes from, the resources, the raw materials, how it was made, which manufacturer it was made in, which country it was made in. We don't do that. And so we're allowing for the retailers to hide a lot of the criminality that's involved with a very innocent purchase of a t-shirt or a pair of jeans. You know, we need to be definitely, you know, of course, it's a multifaceted issue. So it's not going to be resolved through just one stakeholder in all of this. But it definitely starts with us, because they're essentially, as an economic model or as a capitalist model, they're trying to meet demand. You know, that's just basic economics. It's supply and demand. If we are demanding something, if we are
Very
demanding change, they need to supply it. Otherwise, they're out of business. So, yeah.
Do you think that there's like some service that needs to be in order of having the ability to change and edit your clothes, and that is a different way of making money rather than just selling clothes?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. I think all alternative options to, I almost think that the attitude towards buying something new should be completely reversed, where we see it, as I opened up earlier, as a sort of purification process where we feel better about wearing something new. We should actually
makes us feel horrible about consuming more.
Absolutely. It should almost be like, oh
Make
my
us feel
gosh,
guilty.
shock, horror. Why am I buying something new? Why?
Exactly.
Why?
Like when
Should
you
be the
tend to
last
eat
resort.
when you consume too many carbs, you're like, oh my god, I ate
gosh.
so much.
Yeah.
You should feel the same. Like, oh my god, I consume so much.
Yeah, it's almost like, but then, how does the industry sustain itself? Which obviously we'll talk a little bit more into detail later on in the series. But, I do think that the actual change needs to happen with the consumer. The consumer definitely has the ability to create change that will echo throughout the industry. And then slowly we'll start to see, some sort of cohesive solution to this issue.
Definitely. I was also like, on the simplest level, I saw this video, I think it was by H&M, and it was just a bunch of people wearing clothes that you don't necessarily see worn in sort of those combinations, just things styled differently. It was about reusing clothes and using them as much as possible, and not saying like, oh, okay, this, I don't have a top that goes perfectly with this, I'm gonna go buy something more. To be more creative and just be spontaneous and just wear something. If you like two pieces, you can just wear it together without necessarily feeling like, oh yeah, everyone's gonna approve of this, because a lot of times we're like that. So we're always like, oh, do you think this outfit looks okay, or does this look funny? Whereas I mean that it's just on the simplest level, I'd say, just styling things the way you want without necessarily buying more.
It's changing consumer psychology, really.
Yeah.
But then I think also the industry has to change its psychology as well.
And how it markets.
How it markets.
And how it sells,
how the business model is of, mass consumption. And short-term profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if the lack of sustainability is going to affect the industry's future, then a short-term ethos is not going to work. No. So they need to start getting over that now.
Yeah, absolutely.